October 14, 2002, began like any other crisp autumn day in Rochester. New York. The leaves had turned a fiery orange, drifting lazily across the quiet streets, lined with aging brick row houses and small corner shops. But for the Henderson family, the day marked a turning point that would leave their lives forever altered. 12-year-old Emily Henderson and her older brother, 15-year-old Nathan, left for school that morning like any normal school day. They never returned home. Their parents, Marjorie and Thomas Henderson, were frantic by late afternoon when the school finally called, reporting that the children had not arrived. Thomas immediately began driving through the familiar streets, honking the horn, searching for any sign of his kids. Marjorie called friends and neighbors, asking if anyone had seen them. Panic quickly settled over the Henderson household as darkness approached, and the realization grew that something had gone terribly wrong. Local police launched an immediate investigation. Officers canvassed the neighborhood, knocking on doors, checking nearby parks, alleyways, and vacant lots. Flyers were distributed, photographs of Emily and Nathan plastered across telephone poles, grocery stores, and school notice boards. The Hendersons joined the search, distributing leaflets themselves, posting messages on bulletin boards, and asking local businesses to display their children's pictures. Every lead mattered. Every tip was a thread to follow. Despite an extensive search, weeks passed with no sign of Emily and Nathan. Investigators interviewed friends, classmates, neighbors, and even strangers who might have seen something unusual. Surveillance of local transit routes, bus stations, and parks yielded no clues. The case quickly grew cold. The city was small enough that nearly everyone knew the Hendersons, and the absence of the children weighed heavily on the community. Parents began locking doors more carefully, and children were watched closely as the fear of the unknown took hold. Thomas Henderson refused to accept that his children were gone without hope. He spent long nights at the kitchen table, studying maps, noting every sighting, every anonymous tip, and any suspicious activity in the days leading up to the disappearance. Marjorie, meanwhile, clung to faith. She lit candles in the evenings and prayed fervently, believing that her children might be returned safely. The family's home became a hub for volunteers who wanted to help. Friends and neighbors joined in searches through abandoned buildings, wooded lots, and empty warehouses, combing every possible location in the city where the children might have been taken. As the months turned into years, the Henderson family struggled to maintain normal life while keeping hope alive. Thomas's hair began to gray prematurely, and Marjorie grew increasingly frail from worry and sleepless nights. Emily and Nathan's absence created a void in the lives of their parents and siblings, their empty bedrooms a daily reminder of the unresolved tragedy. The police continued to follow up on new leads, but the trail was always cold. Every year, the anniversary of October 14th brought renewed media attention and a flurry of old tips, most of which led to dead ends. In 2005, 3 years after the disappearance, investigators re-examined the evidence with newer techniques. Advances in forensic technology, including improved fingerprint analysis and early DNA profiling, offered a glimmer of hope. Items collected near the children's last known location, including a torn piece of clothing and traces of biological material, were analyzed repeatedly over the years. Each round of testing provided small pieces of data, but nothing conclusive until 2019, when technology had finally advanced enough to detect minute traces of DNA from older samples. The first breakthrough came from a routine audit of the Henderson case file in 2019. Detective Laura Mitchell, part of Rochester's cold case unit, noticed inconsistencies in the timelines provided by witnesses interviewed in 2002. Some statements had been overlooked. Others were lost in the original paper files, and a few potential suspects had never been thoroughly cross-checked with modern databases. Mitchell pushed for a comprehensive re-examination of all physical evidence, including a previously ignored hair sample collected from the Hendersons' backyard fence. By early 2020, new DNA analysis revealed a match in the national database. A man previously convicted of burglary and sexual assault in upstate New York in the late 1990s had genetic material consistent with the hair sample. His criminal history showed patterns of violence and predatory behavior, including previous incidents of targeting children in the Rochester area. Investigators immediately opened a deeper inquiry into his movements in October 2002. Phone records, employment logs, and witness accounts gradually painted a clear picture of the suspect's proximity to the Henderson household during the time of the disappearance. In the months following, detectives compiled enough evidence to confront the suspect. On June 17, 2021, 45-year-old Robert Allen, a local handyman with a history of petty crimes, was taken into custody. Neighbors expressed shock, recalling Allen as polite, helpful, and largely unremarkable. He mowed lawns, helped elderly residents with minor repairs, and attended a small neighborhood church weekly. To the outside world, he had always been the quiet man living at the end of Maple Avenue. But behind the facade, Allen harbored secrets that had remained hidden for nearly 2 decades. During questioning, Allen initially denied any involvement, but investigators confronted him with the DNA evidence, witness statements, and detailed logs of his whereabouts. By the end of several days, Allen unexpectedly confessed. He admitted that he had approached Emily and Nathan near their school, led them to his van under false pretenses, and taken them to an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. He claimed he had panicked after their parents, and the community began searching extensively, and in a moment of rage and fear, had committed acts that resulted in their deaths. Allen indicated that he had hidden the bodies in a remote location outside the city, carefully ensuring no immediate discovery. The confession shocked the Rochester community. For nearly 20 years, the case had been one of the city's most haunting mysteries. Families and law enforcement officials alike had wondered how such a crime could remain unsolved. The revelation that Allen had lived openly in the same neighborhoods, interacting with ordinary residents, added a chilling dimension to the story. It reminded everyone that danger sometimes comes from those who seem entirely ordinary. Investigators immediately organized a search operation based on Allen's statements. Working with forensic archaeologists, cadaver dogs, and detailed maps provided by Allen, teams located the children's remains in a wooded area approximately 15 miles from the Henderson home. The bodies were carefully examined, confirming the sequence of events described in Allen's confession. Despite the years that had passed, the forensic team was able to recover clothing fragments, personal items, and traces of DNA linking Allen directly to Emily and Nathan. For the Henderson family, the discovery was a profound mixture of relief and heartbreak. Marjorie Henderson stated, "I finally know where my babies are, but knowing doesn't erase the pain of losing them." Thomas Henderson described the moment investigators called to inform him as surreal. "I had spent nearly 20 years imagining every scenario. Hearing their voices silenced even after all this time was crushing, and yet in a strange way liberating. We finally have the truth." The arrest and confession had immediate repercussions in the community. Residents organized vigils to honor Emily and Nathan, while local schools used the case to teach about vigilance, community safety, and the importance of reporting suspicious activity. Law enforcement agencies highlighted the case as a model for utilizing modern DNA technology to revisit cold cases, demonstrating that even decades-old mysteries could be solved with persistence and innovation. The trial began in September 2022, drawing significant media attention. Allen's defense tried to argue diminished responsibility, citing mental health issues, but the overwhelming physical evidence combined with the confession left little room for doubt. Victim impact statements from the Henderson family described the enduring pain, fear, and loss experienced over nearly 2 decades. Judges and juries alike were reminded that while time had passed, the gravity of the crimes remained unchanged. After 5 weeks of testimony, the jury returned with a unanimous guilty verdict on charges of first-degree murder and kidnapping. Judge Evelyn Carter sentenced Allen to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, emphasizing that no passage of time lessened the severity of his crimes. The sentence was both symbolic and practical, ensuring that Allen could never harm another child and formally acknowledging the lives of Emily and Nathan. In the wake of the trial, the Hendersons focused on healing and advocacy. They established the Emily and Nathan Henderson Foundation, which provides resources for families of missing children, supports law enforcement training in cold case investigation, and funds technological research aimed at improving forensic methods. Their story has become part of broader national conversations about the persistence of family advocacy, the role of DNA technology in criminal justice, and the importance of never giving up, even in the face of years without answers. The Rochester case stands as a powerful reminder that time alone does not define justice. Through determination, technological advances, and the unwavering commitment of family and law enforcement, even the most deeply buried truths can be uncovered. Emily and Nathan Henderson's story, once a tragic mystery, now serves as a testament to hope, persistence, and the enduring power of justice delayed, but ultimately achieved. The news of Robert Allen's conviction spread quickly across New York State. Television crews gathered outside the Monroe County Courthouse, their lights cutting through the cold fall air, as reporters spoke about the end of one of the state's longest unsolved child abductions. For years, the faces of Emily and Nathan Henderson had appeared on missing person posters, news segments, and billboards. Now there was finally a name, a face and a voice attached to the nightmare that had haunted Rochester for nearly 2 decades. But for those who had lived through the fear, the trial's conclusion was not the end. It was the beginning of a long, painful reckoning. Marjorie Henderson didn't attend every day of the trial. Some mornings she couldn't bear to sit through the details. She told reporters later that hearing the prosecution describe what had been done to her children felt like living the day they disappeared all over again. She chose instead to come on Fridays, when impact statements were read and when the jury would be present. Thomas, however, never missed a single day. Even when his hands trembled as he held his notebook, he sat through every testimony, every photograph, every piece of evidence. He wanted Allen to see him there, to know that after all those years, he was still standing, still waiting for the truth. The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Rachel Linwood, had handled dozens of homicide cases in her career, but she admitted this one was different. The emotional weight of prosecuting a case that began when she herself was in high school wasn't lost on her. It wasn't just about evidence, she said later. It was about giving a family back their story. For 20 years, the wrong person had been living free, pretending to be one of them. A neighbor, a friend, a man who fixed fences. That betrayal runs deep. During closing arguments, Linwood reminded the jury of what the Henderson family had endured. Every day for nearly 2 decades, Marjorie and Thomas Henderson woke up wondering where their children were, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Every birthday passed without candles, every Christmas morning without laughter. That is a life sentence of grief no parent should ever have to live through. The man responsible for that sits before you today. The courtroom was silent, except for the sound of a few people quietly crying in the gallery. Allen sat motionless through it all. He rarely made eye contact with anyone. His expression remained detached, almost indifferent, as though the reality of what he had done hadn't fully registered. When he was given the chance to speak before sentencing, he simply said, "I can't take it back. I was a different person then." His words offered no remorse, no apology, just a hollow acknowledgement of guilt that left the Henderson family cold. After the sentencing, Thomas stepped outside the courthouse and faced the cameras. "It took 20 years, but justice has a long memory," he said, his voice steady but tired. "I've seen the worst kind of evil and the best kind of humanity. We thank the detectives who never gave up, and the scientists who gave us the proof that time had hidden. But make no mistake, this doesn't heal anything. We just finally know who took them from us." The months following the trial were a blur of grief, relief, and overwhelming media attention. Journalists wanted interviews. True crime documentaries reached out. News anchors requested statements. But the Hendersons mostly stayed home. They began to live quietly again, surrounded by the same maple trees that had stood outside their house for decades. Thomas returned to woodworking, spending hours in the garage building small birdhouses, something he said helped him keep his hands busy when the mind wants to wander. Marjorie tended to the garden Emily had once helped plant, the one filled with marigolds and daisies. She told friends that being outside, hearing the wind, made her feel closer to her children. Detective Laura Mitchell, who had reopened the case years earlier, was promoted to lead investigator of the cold case division. She became something of a local hero in Rochester, though she never saw it that way. "It wasn't me," she said in one interview. "It was persistence, science, and luck." Mostly persistence. Mitchell began working with other counties across New York to help train new detectives in how to manage long-term evidence storage and re-examination. The Henderson case had exposed serious flaws in how older cases were handled: paper files misplaced, samples improperly labeled, witnesses never recontacted. Those errors had allowed Allen to go unnoticed for years. The public outcry pushed local lawmakers to propose the Henderson Reform Act, which required all New York counties to maintain digital records of cold case evidence and create standardized procedures for periodic review. It passed unanimously in 2023, marking one of the most significant changes to the state's investigative framework in decades. Thomas and Marjorie attended the signing ceremony, holding a framed photo of Emily and Nathan as the governor signed the bill into law. "If this helps even one family avoid what we went through," Thomas said at the podium, "then my children's lives will continue to mean something." As months turned into a year, the community's grief slowly transformed into a quiet sense of unity. Every October, a candlelight vigil was held at Maplewood Park near the Henderson home. People who had never met the family came to light candles, leave flowers, or simply stand in silence. Former classmates of Emily and Nathan, now adults with families of their own, brought their children, telling them about the classmates they lost long ago. "It's not just about remembering," one woman told a reporter. "It's about reminding ourselves that there's still good in the world, even after something this terrible." But not everyone found peace so easily. Some of Allen's former neighbors were haunted by guilt. A few recalled strange moments, times when he had watched children playing a little too closely, or when he'd offered to give rides home after church events. "You look back now and it's obvious," one neighbor said, "but back then he just seemed lonely. You never think the person helping you fix your porch could be capable of something like that." The realization that he had lived among them, hidden in plain sight, left a scar on the community's sense of safety. In 2024, a documentary aired on national television chronicling the investigation and its resolution. It featured interviews with detectives, forensic experts, and surviving members of the Henderson family. Marjorie agreed to participate reluctantly, saying she wanted the story told accurately, not sensationalized. The film became a national conversation piece about the power of modern DNA technology and the importance of keeping hope alive in cold cases. Donations poured into the Henderson Foundation afterward, allowing them to fund new forensic testing equipment for smaller jurisdictions across New York State. Despite the recognition and the reforms, the emotional toll remained. Marjorie often described her nights as the hardest. "It's quiet," she said in a recorded interview. "That's when your mind goes back to the day they left. You try not to imagine what could have been, but it finds you anyway." Thomas rarely spoke in public anymore, but friends said he found some peace through mentoring other families who had missing loved ones. "He knows exactly what they're feeling," one advocate said, "and sometimes just knowing someone else survived it helps them keep going." Detective Mitchell continued to visit the Hendersons occasionally. She said their living room remained the same, photos of Emily and Nathan still on the mantel, their old-school drawings framed on the wall. "It feels like time stopped in that house," Mitchell recalled. "But it's not frozen in sadness anymore. It's love. You can feel it." Alan was transferred to a maximum security prison near Buffalo, where he remains under lifetime confinement. He has no visitors and has declined every interview request since 2023. Prison officials describe him as quiet, compliant, and largely isolated. Some say he spends most of his time reading. Others say he barely speaks at all. For the Hendersons, his silence no longer matters. As Thomas once put it, there's nothing left he can say that would ever make it right. 2 years after the trial, in October 2024, the city dedicated a small memorial garden near the courthouse in Emily and Nathan's honor. 2 white benches, engraved with their names, sit beneath a maple tree surrounded by flowers. A bronze plaque reads, "For all the children who never came home. May their stories remind us to never stop searching." The Hendersons stood quietly during the unveiling, holding hands as the crowd bowed their heads. Reporters noted that Marjorie smiled faintly for the first time in years. The story of Emily and Nathan Henderson has since become a symbol of perseverance, technology, and faith in justice. Their case is now studied in law enforcement training programs and discussed in criminology courses across the country. More than that, it stands as a reminder that even after decades of silence, truth can still rise to the surface, and that justice, though delayed, never truly disappears. By early 2025, more than 2 years had passed since Robert Allen's sentencing, and the echoes of the Henderson case still lingered across New York State. Though the trial had ended, the ripples it created continued to shape law enforcement, the local community, and the quiet lives of those who had been closest to Emily and Nathan. In many ways, the story refused to fade. It had become part of Rochester's identity, not just as a tragedy, but as proof that patience, persistence, and technology could breathe life back into long-forgotten truths. Detective Laura Mitchell often said that no case ever truly ends. It only transforms. In interviews, she explained how reopening the Henderson file had changed her as both a professional and a person. "When I looked at that photo of Emily and Nathan for the first time, I saw my own kids in their faces," she admitted. "I promised myself I'd never let another file gather dust like theirs did. Cold cases aren't cold. They're waiting. They just need the right moment. The right tool, the right pair of eyes." After the trial, Mitchell spearheaded the creation of a specialized task force known as Project Resolve, a collaboration between state police, university labs, and local sheriff's offices. The group's mission was simple: revisit unsolved cases using the same approach that had cracked the Henderson mystery. The task force began with 15 old cases, some dating back to the 1980s, and within 2 years they had generated leads in nearly half of them. The program soon gained national attention, leading other states to adopt similar initiatives. Meanwhile, the Henderson Foundation had quietly grown beyond what Thomas and Marjorie ever imagined. What started as a small fund to support forensic research had evolved into a nationwide non-profit, helping families navigate the emotional and bureaucratic complexities of missing person cases. They provided grants for DNA testing, emotional counseling, and legal advocacy. The Foundation's headquarters, located in a modest brick building downtown, displayed photos of children who had been found through similar breakthroughs, Faces that now smiled from the walls where Emily and Nathan's photos once stood alone. Every February, the foundation hosted an annual event called the Night of Light, where hundreds gathered in Rochester's Central Square to release lanterns into the night sky in honor of missing and murdered children. Each lantern bore a name, a photograph, or a message written by families who still searched for answers. In 2024, more than 3,000 lanterns floated above the city, a sight that brought even seasoned detectives to tears. Thomas stood beside Marjorie that night, watching the glowing lights drift upward. "They're not gone," he whispered. "They just became light." Yet for all the healing, the case had also reopened old wounds within the community. There were residents who still couldn't accept that Alan had gone unnoticed for so long. At community meetings, some spoke about the guilt of not seeing the signs. The quiet man at the end of the street, the one who smiled, waved, helped fix broken fences, and yet carried unimaginable darkness inside. Others debated how the police could have overlooked certain clues in 2002, such as the witness who mentioned seeing a van near the school, or the neighbor who reported hearing children crying near the warehouse. For Detective Mitchell, those discussions were necessary but painful. "We failed them in 2002, she said bluntly in one forum. "We didn't have the tools, the data, or the understanding we do now. But we learned, and we'll keep learning." Her honesty earned respect even from the harshest critics. By acknowledging the failures of the past, she ensured the next generation of investigators would never repeat them. Marjorie Henderson rarely attended public events.